Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Sounds good. Awesome. All right, let's start. So welcome to chapter 3, which is about computer and internet crime. So in the previous chapters, you learned that to be ethical, you not only need to know about integrity, about ethical frameworks, about how to make ethical decisions, but that we needed a third element, and this third element was knowledge about the topic. So if we want to be ethical in IT security matters, and we don't know anything about security, can we be ethical? Probably not. And that is what this chapter is about. Some of you are in the security track, so you probably already know this and you may skip it. And for some of you, this might be new content. So let's start. In this chapter, you'll learn about the trade-offs between having a very secure system and having a usable system. We can build a very secure system, but if it's very difficult to use, what is the point? If our employees cannot use the email because we require to be super safe, we require them to remember a very, very long password, we require them to log in only from certain laptops, yes, we will have a very secure system, but at the cost of productivity. So you will see that there's always a trade-off between usability and security of a system. We'll see the trend of computer incidents, namely data breaches, why we have more incidents than before. We'll see what are the typical computer attacks, who performs these attacks, and how do we make a company secure. And finally, we'll do a little exercise of how to prepare for when your company or organization is hacked. All right, so let's start. So what is a security incident? So most of you know about famous ones, for example, the Equifax case, where millions of records of private citizens were debugged. Some of you heard about Facebook that lost some customer data, or some hackers stole some data from Facebook, or used some data to do XYZ. So all this is called security incidents. Right. And the problem with this is usually the data. Private data, once it's out, it cannot be put back in. It's not like a physical object. And yeah. You may also notice that there is a trend. If you Google the Google Trends, you will see that data breach, for example, it's going up, incidents are going up. So why is this happening? So one reason that we saw previously is that IT systems are more numerous, more complex. Complexity means that you now have your mobile device at work, you have your laptop, and you have your desktop. And all of these three devices are usually connected through apps. So every time you have a logging access point, every such point increases the risk that you can be hacked, because every point offers the opportunity to an attack. and that's one reason. So more computers. Another reason is that 10 years ago you might have had one email account, and now you probably have an account for email, but also you have an account for Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, your university account, your Blackboard account. So we have more such entry points for hackers to hack or attack. So that's one reason why we have more incidents. Complexity and more entry points. And there's another trend, which is cloud computing. Some people say that this increases the risk. So 20 years ago, if you wanted to hack a computer, you'd have to be in the same room as the computer. Now you just need a connection to the internet, right? So it's much easier for many more people to hack into computers. A typical way that accounts get hacked is that most of the people use the same password in different websites. So if a hacker breaks one website and you use the same password for your other websites, that's a problem. So try not to use the same password in all your services. A typical question in the exam is the definition of exploit. So you should check this definition, the long version, which is in this thing called the book. It's basically will define exploit as an attack on an information system, and exploits take advantages of vulnerabilities. These are flaws or defects in the system. When you fix such a flaw or defect, we apply a thing called a patch. So a patch is an update in the system code or software that will fix it. Every time Windows updates your Windows system, in reality we call these patches. Another interesting thing you should know is about the zero-day attack. So a zero-day attack is when I know about a vulnerability in somebody's software and nobody else knows it, and I use this knowledge to enter the system. There's nothing anybody can do to prevent that. So this situation is called a zero-day attack. There are about 8 types of exploits, types of attacks: virus, worm, Trojan horse, distributed denial service, rootkit, spam, phishing. All of these types of attacks are the same: gain access, unauthorized access to a system, make the system do something the user doesn't know or doesn't want it to do. The difference is in the why. So for example, we have a very interesting chart here. So these are the type of people that do hacks by the motives. So for example, a hacker's motivation is usually play, to test the technical limits of a system, or to gain publicity. So it's ego. Yeah, so it's a typical student that wants to show off what they know. A cracker, so the main motive they will attack something is to create disruption, create damage. Malicious insider is usually an unhappy employee inside the company, and this is the most common type of perpetrator in companies. Industrial spy, the reason they do this illegal activity would be to know what the competition is doing. A cyber criminal will do it for the money, a hacktivist will do it for political motives, and a cyber terrorist will do it to disrupt. So here you have some, and in the book you'll have detailed information about each one. In the USA, there are many laws that address computer crime. If you're not a hacker, I wouldn't worry about those laws, but those laws are very strict. So there's people that hacked into the Pentagon's computer, and they are in jail for many years just because they thought it was a game. So be careful what you do. Now we talk about the I love you virus. You have it on Slack. We talk about the Stuxnet virus. We saw that not all the viruses are to disrupt or steal. Some viruses are used as a weapon to prevent some country to develop something. Around the 2000s, Bill Gates, a CEO of Microsoft, he sent an email to all the Microsoft employees, and in this email he told them, and you can find this email on Slack, he told them, whatever you do now, if it's not secure, whatever code you develop, if it's not secure, it's useless. Because before the year 2000, computer was something new. People didn't really do a lot with computers, but after the year 2000, very important pieces of people's lives and information and banking were being done on computer. And it just happened that Microsoft Windows was not particularly a safe system, and that's why Bill Gates sent this email to all the employees. He just sent these emails very seldom. So he talks about the trustworthy computing. So what's that? It means that having an IT system, a computer that you can trust. And there's this very nice chart. This chart is called the House of Shiva. And on the top of the chart, you put the objective, what you want, so trustworthy computing. And each column represents something you need for trustworthy computing to achieve that goal. So for example, according to Microsoft, to achieve trustworthy computing, you need 4 things. And this chart symbolizes, the pillars symbolize that if one of the pillars disappears, the whole house collapses. So obviously, you cannot trust a system if you don't have any of these 4 things. However, that is not enough. To have a secure system in a company or organization, you also need, or we say it's a combination of 3 things: technology, policy, and people. What does that mean? So technology means having a good firewall, having a good antivirus, right? But that's not enough. If you have a good virus, an antivirus or a firewall, and you don't have rules, policy, that tell people, hey, you have to update your antivirus every 2 months because this and that, or you should not use computers that don't belong to the company inside the Wi-Fi of the company. If you don't have, on top of technology, if you don't have policy, you are not secure either, because you just need one infected laptop inside the company for the company data to be compromised. And not only that, you need technology, you need policy, but you also need people. And what do we mean by people. So we mean that you can have technology, you can have policy, rules, but if people, culture, don't follow the rules, or people don't understand why they have to be careful with XYZ, with not bringing a laptop that is not from the company inside the company, then you don't have security either. So that's why we say it's a combination of technology, policy, and people. Does that make sense? So you need good technology, good policies. One example is the policy that forces us to change the password every 3 months, which might or might not be a good idea. And people, and meaning people, that people know why, and that people are trained periodically on these matters. Right, so another interesting thing you should do when you're in a company is what we call a risk assessment. So when you will work in a company, there's this 8-step method to assess the risk that your company will be hacked. So that's a typical exam question, and here you have a very interesting chart. So you can open an Excel now, so we're going to do this exercise, and this exercise will show you what to do when your company faces an IT problem or a data breach, or when your company is hacked. So when you will work in a company, the question is not whether you will or will not be hacked. All the companies get hacked. A company that has never been hacked doesn't exist. So you want to be prepared for when this happens, because if this happens and you were not prepared, you will not look very professional. But if it happens and you were prepared and you show, yes, we did this risk assessment and I told my boss we have these security problems, then you're safe. But if you don't have this, if you didn't do it, if you didn't prepare, then it will look very bad. So let's see how you would do a risk assessment. So here you have a very good example in the book, and we will do a risk assessment about the security of your house as if it was a company. So you can open an Excel, and in the first column you write assets at risk. So for example, sorry, not assets, but the risk itself. For example, what is the #1 risk at home? Let's say is that a thief comes inside the house and steals something inside the house, right? So put right here, robbery of a home. Robbery of a home. There you go. And what's another risk we face? For example, Wi-Fi hacked. Let's say that's another risk, right? So let's see, robbery of the home. What assets are at risk? So let's say all the valuables of the home. Very good. And how much are they worth? Let's say my home, I have valuables for value of 50,000. So I would put 50,000 here. And then I calculate the probability that these assets will be stolen in 1 year. How do I calculate that? I would do an estimate. And how do I estimate that? So I would say, let's say I live in a neighborhood where there are 100 villas. So I would ask the police how many robberies per year there are in these villas. Let's say they say 0. Let's say I ask, what about in the last 10 years? And let's say they say there have been 3 robberies in the last 10 years. All right, so that means there is a robbery, 3 robberies every 10 years. That means 0.3 robberies per year. Yes, per year, per 100 houses, because that's the number of houses we have in my neighborhood. So what's the probability that my house will be robbed if we assume all the houses are the same? So that means 0.3 divided by 100. So that's the probability that my house will be robbed in 1 year. So that's the probability of year house, probability of being robbed. And if I convert to probability in percentage points, that becomes 0.3%. So there's a 0.3% chance that my house will be robbed this year. Very good. So I'm going to input this number here. So what's the expected impact, economic impact of these two numbers on my house? So there's this thing called the expected value of something, of a distribution, which means you can understand it as the average, basically the annual average. So I'm going to multiply the cost by the probability of the event. So the cost of the event by the probability of the event in 1 year, and that's the expected cost of this. So in this case, it's 150 per year. This means that if every year I put aside 150, after many years, every year I will pay 150, and maybe 1 year I will have this event which costs 50,000, but in the long run I will always be zero, right? So that's what the insurance company use to calculate how much to charge customers plus their fee. Yes, so it's the same as insurance of a car. So every year you pay a little bit, and some year you have an accident, some year you have a big accident, some year you don't have an accident, but on average you pay the same amount of money that you spend on car repairs. So this is what we call the expected cost. Then we assess how prepared we are in the case of this event. So let's say that I have insurance against robbery from RSA insurance. So I'm 100% covered. So in this case, I could say this 100%. I'm not worried about this event. Let's do the next one. You probably have a Wi-Fi at home, and many people are not aware, but Wi-Fi is an entry point of attack into your house. So let's try to assess this. So if our Wi-Fi was hacked, how much money would you lose? Give me your worst case scenario. So in this case, let's say that somebody gains Wi-Fi access and can hack all your devices in your house and can learn your bank passwords and can steal your money in your bank. So let's say this could have an economic impact of 200,000. All right, that's very interesting. Let's try to estimate the probability of this event happening in 1 year. So you would do the same here. You could go by your neighborhood or by Wi-Fi. So what's the percentage of Wi-Fis that get hacked every year? We don't know, but maybe you can find this information. So let's say it's 0.001%. Let's say that's 0.001% of the Wi-Fis in the world Wi-Fi routers are hacked. So that would be like 1%. Okay, so let's say it's 1%. Fantastic. What's the expected economic impact of that? So we do the same. Cost of the event happening, and it happens 1% a year, or once every 100 years, right? So we'll multiply this. And this is the yearly cost of this threat. So if we had to buy insurance against this, and this was the cost of this happening, this would be the money that we should set aside every year. All right. Let's assess the protection we have. So some of you might have the Etisalat protection, which covers you or any of this, but let's say we don't have any protection in this case, nothing. So you would do this for all the risks that your home or your company is exposed to. And then you would rank them. So you would look at the expected cost and at the protection that you have. So in this case, we have insurance, so we don't worry about this one. So we would say -1. And this one, 2,000 is the yearly cost, and we're not protected. So this should be our #1 priority. Does that make sense? So you would list all the threats that you know that you're facing, and if there's a threat that is important and you're not protected, well, it doesn't look good that you don't do anything about it. Make sense? And so do something about it. So in this case, we could do, what could we do? So you could look at the slide that we just saw. This one or this one. Security is a system, is a combination of technology, policy, and people. So you would go back to the Excel and you would say technology, policy, and people. So what could we do technologically to protect against this threat? Well, maybe we could, for example, if you have a Wi-Fi, you can limit the access from the devices to the Wi-Fi by limiting by MAC address, right? MAC address. So that's something you can do. It's very easy. And if a device that whose MAC address is not registered in the router, then it cannot access, right? So that limits a lot. You can make sure that the password is not super easy or set to the default. You could buy a safe router, the safest one, right? You could lock the router in a cabinet, hide it. You can do many things. But we said tech is not enough. For example, some of you saw the video of social engineering, hacking, where a woman calls the help desk of a bank and pretends to be the wife of their husband and takes over the account. That's a very scary video. So we said technology is not enough. You also need policy. So what if somebody calls you home and pretends to be somebody from the telephone company and asks or convinces somebody in your house to tell them the Wi-Fi router password using social engineering? So that would be a problem. So in that case, even if you have the safest router or you have a difficult password, they will be able to take over your Wi-Fi. So what could you do? So you could put a poster in your house saying, never give the password to anyone, even if they say they are from the company. Yes. It could be a policy, so you could make poster, you could write a poster and put it on the house. So that could be a good policy. You could have you could make some rules, right? That's great. But we said this is not enough. There's the people component. So you can make the best rules, you can have the best router, but if your mom doesn't know about the rules or doesn't understand them, that's a weak point in your security. So people here means training or talking to your family, like, hey, this and that, and make sure they understand, and make sure that they are prepared to apply the policy and they understand the tech. Does that make sense? So this is something every company, every serious company has. And as I said, being hacked is not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. And if you have this, at least you show that you were prepared. And it really, really helps to prioritize, because the budget for security is very limited. And this will help you to understand a lot of things. For example, if a protection solution against Wi-Fi hacked costs more than 2,000 per year, then it's not worth it. So you might not buy it. You might say, we prefer Wi-Fi to be hacked because it's cheaper, and that's fine. Usually protection solutions are cheaper than that, but it's important to know also for how much money you should spend on something. And finally, we'll see about computer forensics. So computer forensics companies should also have response plans. What will you do when somebody steals your customer data? Because this will happen. So what will you do? Would you make an announcement? Would you do this? What? So you should prepare for that. Have a plan. Computer forensics. So computer forensics is a job description. It's usually related to hard disks, and basically this job is about finding evidence of a virus or something in an IT system to prove that this person was stealing information from the company. And the typical scenario of computer forensics is a happy employee stealing customer data and giving it to a competitor. Typical scenario. The owner of the company suspects about that employee, so it hires a computer forensic person to prove or find out if in reality this employee is leaking business data to the competition or not. So it's a very interesting job. It's a mix of Indiana Jones and 007, but in IT. All right, so that's it for this chapter. So as a homework, you need to create an Excel file, a risk assessment on the security risks in your home, and submit it for the next Monday. You can submit this in pairs or teams of 4 or 5, and you should have or assess at least 3 rows of elements.